Aloha everyone, my name is Daniel Brown, student at the University of California, Santa Barbara and retail specialist, and welcome back to another case study. Today we will be going over Target Canada. This is one case study that I've looked forward to making and also presenting as well. It's one of my most extensive projects that I've worked on, so I hope you all enjoy it and we'll be going over it today. So Target Canada, great combination, poor execution. So let's go ahead and introduce the case study with first the table of contents. Here we go. Table of contents. The introduction to the case study we will be going over today, Target in Canada. Images of Target Canada, introduction to the leases and agreements in 2011 to 2012. Employment conflicts, supply chain issues, and opening of stores in 2013, struggles after opening and grim outlook, the closure of stores in 2015, future of Target in Canada and further comments with connections, and the ultimate conclusion to the case study. So here we go with the introduction. Introduction to case study. Target. If you're in the United States, you know what a Target is. It is one of the largest department store chains in the United States. So at one point, Target decided to expand their operations beyond the United States by targeting Canada as their prime location back in the early 2000s. After acquiring locations from Canadian chain Zellers, and Zellers, there's more information in the next few slides. Target pushed for a vigorous expansion from the get-go by opening locations left and right in 2013 onward, totaling 133 locations by 2015. However, even before the chain opened, trouble brewed for the subsidiary with issues based on supply and demand, customer expectations, and the strategy taken in order to expand into Canada. Today, we look at these factors and how they ultimately decided the fate of Target Canada in 2015, alongside the future of the subsidiary with further commentary. Target in Canada? Okay, so it would be a no-brainer question to say, is Target in Canada? Or like, oh yeah, Target's in Canada. They're a really successful chain. Well, actually, no. Target used to be in Canada and they don't exist anymore. Like, what? Really? Well, at one point, Target was in fact in the country of Canada in major cities such as Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa starting in 2013. As we will discuss in the next slides, Target only has physical retail stores in the United States across all 50 states due to the factors that ultimately shut down all Canadian stores in 2015. Now, to clear some confusion, yes, in the country and continent of Australia, there are Target stores. However, they are not owned by Target Corporation, but is a different trademark. That Target is actually owned by the same owner that owns Target Australia, not Target Australia, sorry, Kmart Australia. And with Kmart in the United States and with Kmart in Australia, they're also two separate companies as they are owned by two different owners. Just to clear the confusion. So, therefore, Target Australia is not an international location of Target Corporation in the United States, yet it's a different trademark. Sorry to cause some confusion. I hope that cleared up the whole confusion, but just at the bottom line, Target no longer has international locations and they actually don't in fact offer international shipping anymore, but are only for domestic use, including shipping to properties pertaining to the United States. So there's that, and there's the introduction to Target Canada. So in this slide, here are images of Target Canada. I forgot to sense my excitement of how beautiful these stores are, but look how beautiful these stores are, right? These stores really foresaw the future, basically, of Target. And if you see the newer stores in the United States and how they remodel them, they look so beautiful. And here It's more of a simplistic look and really demonstrates the power that Target has. Um, the image, the largest image on the slide to the left, is a one that never opened in Ottawa due to the bankruptcy filing and closure of stores. They wanted to open the store, however, it never happened. The image on the top right is a really nice store as well that was also in Ottawa and just looks beautiful. And the bottom right is the interior design of the Target with the Target heart maple leaf, which is Target loves Canada. And as demonstrated in the table of contents slide, it shows Anthony Fisher, who is the then president of Target Canada, standing right in front of the same store in the inside of the Hamilton location, which is one of the first pilot stores to open. And it just really shows of how nice these locations were. So this is a slide to familiarize yourself of what Target used to look like in Canada when they're still operational or non-operational. And that was that overall. So enjoy the facade and the interior design. While we're going on to the next slide. Here we go. So let's introduce Target Canada with the introduction to leases and agreements in 2011. And this image represents a Zellers location, which discussed in the last slide. I will be going into more depth, but this was a reopened store in Ottawa. Ottawa's going to pop up a lot of times, right? Because it's the main city. Little space in Canada, but it shows one of the facades and the store in general of Zellers. So there we go. So the introduction to the lease and agreements. So on January 13, 2011, Target announced its expansion into Canada after announcing it would be purchasing up to 220 store leases from Zellers for 1.825 billion Canadian dollars, which represents 1.440 billion dollars in today's value after transferring from back then in 2011. Now, to clarify, Zellers is a Canadian-based department store chain alongside other chains such as Walmart and Canadian Tire, which Canadian Tire is a hardware specialty store that has been struggling alongside Sears Canada due to increased competition and little to adapt to the current retail environment in Canada. While Target did not buy out Zellers as a whole, it did leave them in a desperate position, leaving Zellers with 64 less desirable stores in Canada. As a result, Hudson Bay, owner of Zellers, closed most of these stores starting in July 2012. Okay, let's break it down. So Zellers was struggling to begin with. They were struggling to compete with other retailers in Canada, specifically Walmart, because they had such a big influence with their supercenters and customer attraction to go to these new stores instead of Zellers, who had old, boring stores. And so the new CEO of Zellers, and I forgot the name, I apologize, but he tried to revolutionize the brand. And so Zellers had a steady threshold in the market, not as much as they had back in the 90s. Think Kmart, for example, in the United States, they were such booming in the 90s, and then they were lower in the 2000s. This was Zellers' situation right now. And so Zellers had, what, almost 300 locations? And the Target came in, and they said, hey, Hudson Bay, let me buy 220 Zellers location. Like, you got it. And then Zeller says, guys, why are we liquidating our stores when we didn't even file for protection? And now they're left with 64 locations, and now they're liquidating those stores. And surprisingly, they're left with under 10 locations after 2 years. And that basically made them extinct in Canada and ultimately led to their demise. So thanks to Target Canada, there goes Zellers with their leases. So there we go, just a little humorous but a little sad tell into how Target Canada ended Zellers, and then afterwards Target Canada failed. So it's a fail and a fail. So I don't know. So let's go on forth with the slide. Starting in 2012, Target, after acquiring now only 189 from the 220 leases originally planned, closed the acquired Zeller stores and converted them into the new Target stores, which lasted 6 to 9 months to remodel the store. To close the Zeller spaces, then Target comes in, they remodel it, and respace the location to open as a Target Canada location. Of the 189 stores, between 125 to 135 of these locations were renovated to be Target stores, while 39 Zellers locations were sold to Walmart Canada, with the rest to other retailers. So from those spaces, as seen in the previous slide, or the previous slides, 133 locations ultimately ended up being Target Canada, and the rest were sold off to other retailers from those 220 locations overall. So it was a whole process of leases and communicating with the landlord in order to have a stable base or some stable base to go into the Canadian market. So this slide is lasting longer than it's supposed to because I found it humorous, but this is the introduction to Target Canada and their retail formats. So after they acquired these leases, put Zellers in a horrible position under Hudson Bay and converted the stores, now we see issues going from supply chain, employment conflicts, and opening of stores in 2013. So everything seemed to go well under Target Canada's end, with the sudden expansion of Target stores through buying leases from Zellers through Hudson Bay. However, this would only become a problem due to a main factor that is the backbone of retail stores and just companies in general, the employees. As Zellers locations were to close due to Target remodeling them to become their stores, Target did not retain the former Zellers employees and had to reapply to continue working in the new Target location. So Target came in, they said, hey, Zellers, okay, you're closing your stores. The employees, they have to reapply to our stores. And they said, what? I worked here for 15 years and I have to reapply with some chance of not getting accepted? Interesting. Unlike Walmart's expansion through the acquisition of Woolco stores, and Woolco was operated under Woolworth in 1994, Walmart kept their employees from Woolco and gave them raises even. As a result, productivity and stability in the stores remained the Walmart, and Walmart ultimately had a main factor in making them successful in Canada. With veteran employees reapplying and some not even getting the job, while employees with little to no training from corporate did get it, some employees did have the energy and the motivation to match of what Target Canada was looking for, but they only received 2 to 3 weeks of training and not so much training to just really know the retail market, but they didn't know the stores as wholes. And they said, okay, good luck. And they said, scratching their heads like, oh, what do we do here? As a result, it was a tone of instability for Target's new team in Canada. This factor would help be a burden towards success in their stores going forward with employment issues, that employment conflict of inexperience and not so much balance in between. On top of the employment problem, Target also experienced supply chain issues due to the error into the technology used with SAP, which is also known as Systems, Applications, and Products, that had trouble in Canada due to differences in the United States and themselves. So, see, even back in 2012 and 2013, there were supply chain issues. Not only do we experience it today with major companies of inventory being off the coast of Los Angeles and Long Beach and other coastal cities, but we saw it in 2012, 2013, primarily because there were some technological problems between setting up a main base between Target Corporation in the United States and Target Canada, the subsidiary, and of course Canada in receiving inventory and so forth. As a result of these issues with sending and distributing items to stores, this caused a supply chain issue, as mentioned previously. Although Target Canada was suffering from this issue, they still went ahead and officially opened 3 test stores on March 5th, 2013 in Fergus, Guelph, and Milton. More stores would open in the coming months, however, did include the trouble of keeping shelf stocked. And as I mentioned, I apologize if I mispronounce any of the cities mentioned, but they opened the stores because, in hindsight, right, as a common sense factor, why would you be paying leases of stores that you haven't opened um, when you just wanted to open them already? So they just went ahead, but some of the shelves were just empty as a result of the supply chain issues. So this is an issue that has been apparent throughout the coming months and operational days at Target Canada, and will be apparent going forward. And here we go. Struggles after opening and grim outlook for Target Canada. So after the pilot stores and other stores opened throughout 2013, because Target Canada said, okay, let's open some stores then, and then some stores in this week and this week and this week and this week throughout the span of Canada, they enjoyed strong openings because the Canadian population said, oh my goodness, we don't have to travel across the border to go to a Target because, well, as mentioned previously, Target was only in the United States of America and nowhere else. And Target said, the Canadians said, man, we're so fortunate to have a Target, let's go there. However, with these openings, subsequent results disappointed Tony Fisher, the president of Target Canada, due to customers believing that these stores did not hold up to their American counterparts across the border as prices were higher, and the feeling of going to a Target was not the same as going to a Canadian Target. So soon after, the first time that the demographic went to a Target location in Canada, they said, huh, this isn't the same feeling. It felt a little weird. And then afterwards, they didn't come back. So you didn't have returning customers, maybe some, right? But you didn't have as many as you expected, and that decreases profit because you don't have a stable customer base returning to your stores, which leads to a declining mainstream of customers. Alongside this reason, supply chain issues consisted with Target Canada at many of their stores. Customers were furious about this issue, and employees were left hopeless of stocking as much as they could during a time when the technology was not there, of scanning the SKUs into stock, of fitting them into the crates and putting them on the shelves with the distribution center. It just wasn't working out, and then everybody was frustrated, painstakingly trying to solve the issue, but it never worked out. So this really tired the company, really tired the employees, and I'm going to get to the graph in a little bit, really just was apparent in the company overall. Due to these factors, alongside others that created an impasse for Target's profitability in Canada, Target Corporation projected Target Canada to bring in 10% of its profits by 2017, so 4 years later. So things were really looking grim from the get-go. However, due to a vigorous expectation from Canadian customers when there was nothing to sell with a bad outline, it was simply impossible to turn in a profit that early on. So they said, guys, you better come back. But the Canadian customers said, well, with empty shelves, price is way too high, and not the same feeling as I would have had if I went over the border, went across the border and went to a United States Target. I'm not coming back. So there was already some apparent struggles and just what Target Canada was facing. Later on, Tony Fisher was later dismissed as president of Target Canada and was replaced by Mark Schindel, who was Target's senior vice president of merchandising operations at the time back in the United States in Minneapolis. With this replacement, he was hopeful to turn around things to ensure Target Canada had at least one profitable quarter. And Mark was very experienced, of course, back in Target United States. So he said, oh, okay, let's fix things up. And well, Graph on the right explains it. Therefore, after his appointment, things were, getting bad. And after we have analyzed the graph, we see an exponential decrease, a consistent and as well as an exponential decrease in loss during the quarter. And we see a big droop starting in the first quarter of 2013, and then we see an increase, then a decrease all the way down, and then going forward when they soon close in 2015 with the last quarter in 2014, things were not looking good. During the time of the position exchange, Target Canada began to become somewhat familiar with their technology and began to send out more and more items from the distribution centers where they have been sitting for months due to a lack of knowledge in the system. However, the damage had already been done by the end of 2014. So even though the supply chain issue was becoming a less apparent issue, they still said, this is a really big problem. We're losing a lot of money. We might have to reconsider our operations and our expectations in Target Canada. And back in the United States, Brian Cornell, the current CEO of Target Corporation, replaced Greg Steinhafel, who was the then CEO of Target USA. And this replacement came after a massive data breach they've experienced in the 2010s and put Target in a really bad position. So Brian Cornell came in and said, all right, let's fix this thing. And one of his operations, the thing on the sheet, is with Target Canada. And as an outsider spectator, he said that Target Canada was essentially doomed. And Cornell eyed them for a shutdown due to the financial performance they've had in the last 1.5 years. And it's funny to think that after 1.5 years, he had so much horrible financial hardship as experienced in the graph. And it just really summarizes the struggles that they've had after opening and the outlook afterwards. So, after those reportings, we go into the closure of stores in 2015. So as a result of the financial hardship that the subsidiary has caused towards Target Corporation, on January 15, 2015, Target Canada announced that they will be closing all 133 locations in Canada through court-supervised restructuring proceedings. So this was it. This was the end of Target Canada in the beginning of 2015, and they were going forward with the liquidation proceedings. With $7 billion spent on this expansion, $2.1 billion lost in the quarterly earnings, not even earnings reports, right? Target Canada expecting to turn its first profit in 2021. So in the first quarter of 2014, or when they announced it between 2013 and 2014, instead of saying 2017, they said 2021. And this isn't even considering COVID because, of course, COVID wasn't a thing back then. And if COVID considered, you could then expand that by a lot more years. Target Corporation made the executive decision to close all stores by April, with the proceedings going on in January. Target closed all their 133 stores by April 12, 2015, with fixture sellings lasting a little longer after the official closure. Alongside this, planned stores never got open, and roughly 17,000 employees were put out of work due to this decision. The following month, after Target Canada closed all of their locations, Target returned some of their leases back to the landlords and auctioned off leases and properties to new tenants, with retailers such as Canadian Tire and Walmart Canada occupying the former locations throughout Canada. By June 2015, the real estate process was completed, and Target Canada completely folded in the country. Although Target did continue to mainstream shipping to Canada and other international locations, Target ultimately discontinued this option and only ships to domestic states and territories such as Guam, Virgin Islands, and etc. So this was the rapid and to Target Canada. After, well, the announcement was made less than 2 years after they opened, and they closed a little over 2 years since they've opened. This was the end of Target Canada, the rapid, expansion and closure of all the stores. Even though things seem to be getting better, in the long term, the executive decision has been ultimately made, and they closed their locations. And here we go, going towards the conclusion. The future of Target in Canada and further comments with connections. And the image that is symbolized in this slide is a Kmart store in Canada back in 1994. And this I'll get back to when I go towards the slide with the further comments and connections. But now let's focus on the future of Target Canada. So as of 2021, for this year, Target does not look like it will be expanding beyond the United States and their borders again. As it continues to expand domestically and improve on their operations through e-commerce, logistics, and customer relations, we will wait and see to when Target Corporation feels comfortable with expanding beyond their borders again. From the trip back in 2013, we would see several factors that Target would need to focus on in order to expand successfully. And even from 2013, we look back to 2011 when they signed all those leases from sellers. One is to create a stable e-commerce site. I haven't mentioned this in the slide, but when they opened Target Canada, there wasn't a functioning e-commerce website for it, so they didn't have a strong presence then, so that's one of the main things they focus on. The second one is to familiarize themselves with the new technology abroad, including their employees in retail stores. So the employees, of course, need to know the technological systems with decent training more than the given time period, and they should be able to note issues and the progression of technology in a certain country when going towards retail stores and their distribution centers with the logistics team. Third is to lessen the vigorous expansion and take things slow with opening of stores. So they bought so many leases, 220. However, they didn't even use them all. They used a little bit of it, 133 out of 220 from sellers. They put a company. They were the main factors of why a company went bankrupt. Not bankrupt, but to close all their stores. But they were a little smart in not opening all the stores at once. They opened 3 pilot stores, then they opened a little at a time. However, buying all of those leases, they should at least take a little more time to accurately account for leases signed and which areas and etc. The fourth and last reason is know your audience. Even though Target did understand what Canadians were looking for, the Canadians rebacked them back and said no. And knowing that they won't experience a feel to go across the border to a Target store in the United States and having prices that are way too high for Canadians, you have to understand your audience better and what they need in order to succeed in a retail store by giving what the customer wants, because customer expectations are always number one. So that is the future of Target Canada, and just a little bit of a rundown from the failures that Target Canada had. What would be successful for them to expand into international locations overall? And here we go with further comments and connections that I want to make. And this is the first time I have ever done it in a retail case study, because I really want to not only appreciate, but I want to give a little more depth into the Canadian retail market and what Target Canada really was with connections. So in the retail community, there's one main aspect with Canada, and that is it's a hard market to move into primarily. With an unprecedented retail environment and a hard-to-get-by audience, as seen in Target Canada, many retailers have moved out historically and now currently due to these factors. With my last slide, I mentioned, of course, know your audience. With the mistakes made, now they sort of do know their audience, but with trial and error, they will get to know them better. Kmart, Sears, and Target are just some of the top retailers in the United States that have moved out of Canada due to the hard market and increased competition with local brands. Yes, as seen in 2 slides ago with the image of Kmart, They once were in Canada and they moved out because the competition was tough. They were competing against, well, funny to mention again, Zellers. They were competing against Canadian Tire, and they're also competing against Hudson Bay. And ultimately, in the late 90s, Hudson Bay bought out Kmart Canada, and they transferred all those locations. They closed them. They transferred them towards Zell locations when Hudson Bay also bought out Zellers as well. And the Kmart location that you saw in the slide in the 2 slides ago transformed into a Zellers location, which has, of course, since closed as well. And it's such a nice location. It looks so 90s and it looks so formatted correctly. But retailers historically have moved out and they've had really high competition to ultimately close their locations, rebrand, and be repurposed. Walmart is actually a prime example of an American company that has worked due to fortunate circumstances in the 1990s moving forward. An established employee base, the expansion of supercenters, and a well-known customer base is every company's dream that has turned right for Walmart. So when they established themselves to buy out the Wilco locations, they already had such a great employee environment, and their well-executed expansion with supercenters, which the Canadian base does like, they've had a really nice success then and now. From Target Canada, it says, I would say the CEOs and management of the subsidiary were not to blame of who was there during the time period of the store opening. You know, with Anthony Fisher, he's really not to blame. He did everything he possibly can in Target Canada to keep them afloat. And even though it didn't work in the end, he tried his best under the circumstances given with the technological systems and the employees with the customer base. It was a whole collection of poor execution in setting up the stores and the rollout of the project that lasted a little over 2 years, which created an endless period of suffering for everyone that was involved in it. So Target Canada was a thing that was established that had a really bad elevation, a really bad foundation, in which even though no matter what you try to do in making it better, it didn't work out in the end, and ultimately closed all the locations in which they were either sold off or still sit vacant in shopping centers or standalone stores in Canada as of today. So those were my further comments with connections to other retailers that have failed or succeeded in the country of Canada. And here we go, my ultimate conclusion to this case study. Target Canada, a subsidiary under Target Corporation in the United States, began its vigorous expansion through the purchase of existing leases from Zellers that essentially closed almost all of their locations. Due to existing troubles such as employment conflicts, supply chain issues, and customer complaints, Target Canada began to go into a downward slope the minute their doors opened. As more and more money was inputted into the subsidiary and nothing was coming out of it, Target Canada met its fate after it was announced that they would be closing less than 2 years after they opened the doors for the country of Canada. After April 2015, Canada no longer had a Target to shop in and would now go back to their old ways of traveling over the border to visit a Target in the United States. With further tie-ins towards other companies that have failed in Canada and what steps Target might take if anything like this would happen again, this shows the interesting yet gruesome outlook the subject shows overall in the retail environment. Sometimes I would like to think that I place myself in the shoes of the presidents, of the CEOs of these companies, and what ideas you would come up with employee morale and just employee retail stores overall, and thinking, how could I succeed today? What can I do to make this company better? And it's all just, imagination. But in the retail environment, it's just very fascinating to explore these companies, to realize what mistakes not to make, and just what to do overall. So that is a conclusion of the case study. So thank you once again for watching this video. Again, it was a very nice, lengthy an extensive project that I've worked on, and in the background of this slide, I really like the neon lights that Target used, and some have in the United States. This one is in Riverdale, Utah, and it was a supercar Target. And with Target, there used to be Target Greatlands, Super Targets, Super Target Center. All of these things are so nice, and I thought this was um, really good to put into for the final slide. So again, thank you once again for watching this video. I hope you got something out and you learned something new about Target Canada when they used to exist and the failures that set them up. I appreciate you watching this video. Until next time, thank you everybody, stay safe, and see you in another retail case study video. Bye-bye.